Hello, and welcome to the Outcry Theatre Podcast. I'm Becca Johnson-Spinos, and I'm the Artistic Director of Outcry Theatre. Every episode of this podcast delves into the artistic process of creating theater. This episode is about our current production of The Legend of Arthur, written by myself, Becca Johnson-Spinos, and Jason Johnson-Spinos, adapted from the Arthurian legend. Hi, this is Miss Becca, and I'm here with some of the stars of The Legend of Arthur. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Logan Beutel. I'm playing King Arthur.
Hello, I'm Weand, and I am also playing King Arthur.
Hello, I am Calin. I am playing young Arthur.
Hi, I'm Brayden Lawrence, and I'm playing young Arthur as well.
All right, thanks guys for being here. My first question is, tell us a little bit about the story.
Basically, the story of the play is following King Arthur throughout his entire life as a young man, which is where young Arthur comes in, and as king when King Arthur comes in and shows all of his years on his path to becoming a king, and also shows all the years of his kinghood. And it shows his love relationship with Guinevere in both timelines. It shows his deep friendship with Lancelot in both timelines, and his incredible father-son connection with Merlin. And there's all sorts of magic and all sorts of quests and betrayal and all that good stuff.
Did you guys have any prior connection with the King Arthur stories, or how did you connect with the piece, I guess, when you heard that we were doing it?
So actually, my first connection with the Arthur story was actually my very first play ever. I did a King Arthur play. It was just a little camp thing, and I was playing Arthur's dad, and that's my first connection with the story. And I just and when it was announced that we were doing The Legend of Arthur, I just got really excited, and I just thought about all of the first show I did, and I was just here now, I'm wow, it's been a long journey.
Coming full circle.
I've known Miss Becca for years, and I've known many of the adaptations that she's wanted to do. And I've known, I think the one that I think that she has hyped up the most to me of wanting to do is King Arthur. And when I found out she was doing this as the summer show, I was stoked.
The only background that I had ever had of the show was the 1960s Disney version of The Sword and the Stone. And I actually really liked that story growing up as a kid. And then whenever they announced it, I was excited to see the adaptation that Miss Becca and Mr. J would put on the story, because I definitely did not know a lot about it. But after I did a bunch of research, I found that the story was really cool and interesting, and the more rehearsals that I come to and participate in, the more I really connect with Arthur, and the more I understand where he comes from and his thoughts and emotions, and that's how I connect with the story.
So, as you guys said, our particular version of the story is a brand new adaptation by myself and, as they called him, Mr. Jason. So what makes our version different and special from the traditional version of the King Arthur story?
Well, the big obvious thing is that it is not told in chronological order. It's told very out of order, where it usually goes back and forth between the young people's timeline and the older people's timeline. And it kind of shows the parallels and the kind of equal opposite things that are going on in both timelines because of that. And we kind of talk about it, and we kind of say that it's sort of like the Pulp Fiction of King Arthur stories, because it is told all out of order, and you do kind of have to use your own wits to piece it together in your own mind.
You get to see the whole Arthur's whole life, Guinevere's whole life, the whole however long they live. but it really helps you see some little things from when they were a child really impact them in the future, and it just carries along their whole life. And a memory from this time can be revisited and bring a moment to Arthur in the future. The parallels is so significant, and so it makes you think about Arthur and his life and everything that's going on. So I think that's a really cool part of this show.
As adults look back into their childhood, they realize the way that they act now reflects off of how they were raised, and it's super interesting to see how young Arthur changes into the man that he is, and how Guinevere changes into the woman that she is, as well as Lancelot and all these other characters, and it's super interesting and super cool.
Another thing that is very starkly different from the source material of the original King Arthur stories is that we have included in the young Arthur timeline, we've included young Lancelot and young Guinevere, who in the original stories don't exist. Arthur meets both of them when he's an adult, but we show their deep connections from childhood, and thus it makes all the things that happen in adulthood much more powerful. And we see how they've all changed as people, and we see how they all haven't changed as people. Another thing is that we see Mordred and Morgan Le Fay throughout the play as very overarching evil forces that are always lurking out there in the darkness of the story.
So tell me a little bit about Arthur. What's he like, and what's his journey like, and how is your Arthur different than the other person's? How is young Arthur different than old Arthur?
So I think the biggest transition from young Arthur to old Arthur is when Arthur first starts out, he's just this kid, and the only thing he wants to do is just change the world and just make it the better place. And that's really his main goal, and to just make himself the best he can be and just strive to always be good. And then once he finds out that he becomes king, he just gets overwhelmed and just scared, and he just doesn't know what to do. And he just, like, his whole life is just changing, and it's just, at first he doesn't want it, and he's, like, just extremely overwhelmed. But then once he becomes king, like older Arthur, he basks in his glory, and he just takes it all in. And he does have moments where he does get nervous, and he doesn't know what to do, and, he goes to Merlin for help, and he has the round table and all that to take care of. But he still wants to fulfill his goal and just become the best king that he can possibly be.
Kind of going off who Arthur is, I just think he is really this chill guy who really wants to do the right thing. And that's very, very important to him. And no matter what, he wants to do the right thing and always be a good person. All he's ever wanted to do was change the world for the better. And as he grows up, he starts dealing with all these issues of becoming king and stuff, and since Merlin's talked to him about he's going to be this great king, he's going to be the once and future king, he starts getting obsessed with glory, and he needs to achieve his life's purpose. But that's also kind of like, it's like that's the good thing, that's what he wants to achieve, but that's also like the issue, that's what gets in his way. But overall, I just think he is a chill guy who's trying to do what is right. And it's such a stressful situation that whenever he grows up and becomes king, it's so overwhelming.
So King Arthur is very interesting. I kind of compare him sometimes at some points to like a tortured artist or something, because there are many points where he believes in himself and he's so confident in what he's doing, but then there are so many other points when he is like, I am not worthy of this. How am I king? What the heck am I doing here? I think it all goes back to the values Merlin instilled in him as a young child. I mean, he instilled in him that the world needs to be fixed, and that a good king will always do what is right and will make decisions that even though they may hurt him, if they're for the greater good, then that's what he should do. yeah, and he struggles with that, and much of the pain in his life comes from those decisions that he knows will hurt him, but that will benefit the kingdom as a whole.
What's it like being in a play where you have to interact with yourself? And also, what is it like working with another actor who's playing yourself?
Well, first off, I love Calin. And Calin is playing the younger version of my King Arthur, so he's the young Arthur to my King Arthur. I love acting. It sounds weird. I love acting with myself. It's such a crazy experience, but it allows for a lot of like reflective moments and getting to see your younger self and getting to see the moments and the memories that you have, but it's being played by someone else, but you feel connected to them. You feel like it's you. It's just such a crazy thing, and it's nothing like anything I've done before, but I love getting to act with my younger self.
I think it's kind of weird because me and Dylan, we have played parts together before where we've been brothers and best friends, but now that we're like each other, I have to get in like, it's a bit weird, but I think it's extremely cool, and it's definitely nothing like I've ever done. And just having those different moments where like you feel yourself there, but like you don't like really like yet like you connect with like your older self in like this kind of like this like weird way. And I just think it's really awesome, and I love to play that with Dylan, who's a person I have acted with before and I love acting with all the time.
So I as well love my young Arthur. I love BT so much. He is kind of new to Outcry, and this is only my third show with him, but he has such a raw talent to him, and it is such an honor to work with him and to be playing myself with him and have all these, I think, very important and poignant moments for my own character with him. And I think that, you know, there is an importance to having that relation with young Arthur, because it does sort of give some context to my own character in a way, because it does show how much I, haven't changed. Again, like I said earlier, how much I haven't changed or how much I have changed, or, moments of like, how the heck did I end up here, So yeah, there's a very big importance to that, and having BT along with me for the journey has been so great. I love my little me.
Being the younger version of the famous Logan Beutel, oh my goodness. It's so awesome. And the moments that young Arthur shares with old Arthur are so raw and emotional, and you get to see both perspectives of it, because it's older looking back at your younger self, but your younger self kind of seeing the future that Merlin doesn't tell you, but you can see, you're seeing with your own eyes, is so cool. And to see young Arthur's reaction as well as old Arthur's reaction interacting with each other are so great. And another thing that happens in the show is that King Arthur sometimes watches the beginning or the end of young Arthur's scenes, and he is just looking back at how he used to be. And sometimes you miss your younger self and you miss the way that you used to be, but sometimes you're proud of how much you've grown and how much you've accomplished since then.
The whole genesis of the idea of wanting to write this adaptation was that I wanted to have two actors playing Arthur. It was really important to me to show him as a young man and as an old man, and not by one actor, but by multiple actors that would take us in the journey. And I think while I could very easily just have one actor play him for all these ages, especially when we have actors that are playing ages far different than their own anyway, to me, it was really important to have these scenes where they were together on stage. And the very first scene that I wrote in the play was a scene between both Arthurs and Merlin interacting, where Merlin is saying the exact same thing to both versions of him. Their struggle and their change as they grew up being reflected in one another. We have a lot of mirroring moments and a lot of moments where they're doing the same thing on stage together. But many, many years apart, I think, was something that was super important to me, to see both the differences and the similarities in a person as they grow up, which is a thing that I think about a lot.
I'm not going to spoil too much, but there's this dance that it's one of my favorite dances in the show. It's so cool. But it's about Arthur's first battle, King Arthur's first battle. And there's this young Arthur's on stage too, and he's preparing, he's like training and stuff. So it's two different sides, two different time periods, two different worlds at the moment. And it is the most crazy thing to be judged by yourself. So Calin, we have these moments where obviously King Arthur is in battle and he is having to fight people, and having your younger self, an innocent, pure version of yourself, judge you and look at what he's grown up to be is like a crazy acting moment and a crazy reflection on who you are. And I just think having another person play Arthur allows for such a cool moment in the show.
What's the most challenging thing about playing Arthur?
For King Arthur, the hardest thing is you have to realistically portray like 40, maybe 50 years of Arthur's adult life and be realistic and, not over the top, and again, like show sort of the way that, things over time have affected him and in many ways kind of eroded him over time and maybe have made him, have elevated him. Another thing that is very challenging about playing this role is that we do a lot of fighting in this play, and the swords and shields we use are like actual swords and shields, and they're like actual metal, and they're very heavy. And Arthur's sword, in particular Excalibur, is heavier than every other sword, so that's pretty fun. Dylan's flexing his muscles right now.
Yeah, it was. To add on to what Logan said, I definitely agree with him on having to portray years and years of this person's life. And in that, it would be the relationships he has with people such as Guinevere and Merlin, because he's built such deep relationships. They've gone through so much, literally running a kingdom together, growing up together since they were children. It's really hard as an actor to portray such depth of a relationship with someone and especially when you're jumping around in age, you have to like progressively show your experience with them as partners in a relationship.
Well, I don't think that the different ages of young Arthur we get to play is as difficult as old Arthur. It is definitely a hard job to play apart from like a kid from being like 13 to about 18 after he's just been crowned king. Obviously, I have a little bit of an easier job with the younger age because I've played multiple tiny kids in the past couple shows. But I think definitely the hardest scene for me, at least, is my older scenes where I have to that's when I try to act the most like Dylan, and it's just difficult because, he's old and he's been crowned king and he's just like super scared and nervous.
The most challenging thing, I think, is being so optimistic, because this character that I play is very, very optimistic and just wants to change the world and wants to work hard to do that, and not everyone has that mindset. Yeah, it's just hard to play a very happy character, and also whenever we do old Arthur reflecting with young Arthur and really emotional scenes like that, there are very powerful moments that young Arthur shares with the audience that is hard to do, but it's really cool and raw.
Not one of them mentions the fact that they also have like 7 dances that they have to do in this show.
So much fun.
Yeah.
So many dances. I feel like this one has so many dances.
I love
especially
dancing.
don't they cool.
We've been in Newsies.
That's true. Nothing beats Newsies. All right. We're not talking about Newsies today, though. Okay. What is the most fun thing about playing Arthur?
The most fun thing about playing Arthur is any moment I get to be with young Arthur and, like, I don't know, either, reflect on, myself, whether I get to be aggressive with him, whether I get to have a sad moment with him, whether I get to, kind of be like, who's that nub right there moment kind of thing, whether I get to dance with them, any moment that I get to have with my younger self is just like the funnest thing. The most fun thing.
I personally think the most fun thing about Arthur is portraying all of his feelings and stuff through the dances. Personally, I love acting through music and using your body because I feel like it is so powerful. And I feel like there's a lot of manipulation in some dances, and it all just shows how people are affecting Arthur and what he's dealing with and all the struggles of these different relationships and showing this character who's very, I would still say he's pure and wants to do the right thing. Showing him through dances is really, I feel like, the most fun thing about playing Arthur.
You guys were cast in this show, playing these parts before the script was finished. So what's it like being in a brand new play and playing roles that were at least somewhat written for you?
Going into it was actually really scary. Miss Becca helped us out a little and sent out for the people who are auditioning Arthur monologues and stuff like that. And also you had to do a bunch of research on the character to better understand what kind of emotions you need to portray for that. And going into auditions was harder because you couldn't read the full script and you couldn't use the material that in the end is going to be what you perform. Callbacks was really, really crazy, and it was really great because you finally get to see what Miss Becca and Mr. J wrote for the characters, and it's a really cool thing to see and read and stuff, and you kind of like applaud them in your head whenever you read them to see how great the scenes are. Thinking about how these characters were written specifically for us is like mind-boggling. You would never think that a character would ever be written for you, and it's so crazy, and like I feel so honored to think that this character was written specifically in mind with me.
Becca and Jason know Logan and I fairly well, just a little, So I think this role oddly captures us very well. There are just moments we have on stage that we're like, this is definitely us. So it's such a cool experience to be acting these moments and just going through rehearsal and being like, this is us. This is literally, we are Arthur. And I think it's magical. It is truly a privilege to have a part written for you, and it just makes you much more connected to the part.
Scene-wise, a challenge to playing Arthur is that indeed Arthur is very much a hybrid of me and Dylan, and me and Dylan usually play very different roles. In fact, we usually play roles alongside each other, so getting to play the same role is crazy. But it's a very cool challenge, and it's very cool to sort of be reading the script and be like, that's a Dylan moment right there. That's a Logan moment right there. She did that totally for me. Or, she did that totally for Dylan.
It's definitely very special, and I definitely do cherish all the moments I have. And it's like when I was doing research for the show, for doing research on Wart, it was like it's definitely like young Arthur, but it's not fully like this version of young Arthur. And I do have a lot of moments on stage where I'm like, oh yeah, this is something that I would do. But even the moments I don't have, where I'm like where I wouldn't normally do this, it still feels like something that like I would do. And just knowing that all these parts were written for us just feels very special, and I do feel very honored.
So Brayden Lawrence joined Outcry. His first show was Curious Incident last fall. And so he's really only been here for less than a year. He's also a baby child. He just finished his 8th grade year. So he's one of our, I guess, younger high school actors. He's going into 9th grade year next year. And this is his first lead at Outcry and his 3rd show. So what's it been like to get the big part, to do the thing here at Outcry in your 3rd show? How's your first lead been?
Whenever the cast list first came out, I was just like so stoked and amazed, and I couldn't believe what I was reading. It was so insane to think that I hadn't even finished doing my 2nd show, and I had already just been casted as this huge part in this amazing journey in this amazing show. And being the lead, it's so cool. It's so great. I love getting to portray Arthur and his story because I feel so emotionally connected and drawn to it. I think that he has amazing moments, and I feel so special getting to play them, as well as these amazing dances like Don't Be Cruel, which is showing the love triangle relationship with Arthur, Lancelot, and Guinevere's, as well as the young people with that. And getting to show the emotion that is in that dance is so special and important, and I understand everything, as well as the Arthur being in battle and young Arthur being kind of training and studying and stuff, getting to share the moment of judging my older self is so, it's probably my favorite moment in the entire show, because getting to watch that and getting to portray that emotion that he sees in that is so special and so crazy and fun to do. And yeah, it's great. It's crazy to think that this is only my 3rd show and I'm playing such a great part.
So Logan has been my student since he was 10. We've been together for almost 8 years of work together. This is his 30th show with me. And while he's already been cast in another show, actually, it's funny, he and Dylan are doing a show together that we're creating together, where they're cast as Icarus and Daedalus brothers. So they'll be back on stage together again soon. But this is Logan's last youth production at Outcry and his last youth production with me. So what's that been like? And I don't know, any reflections on your time here at Outcry?
At the beginning of this season, last year, I was kind of unsure of how this year would be, kind of foreseeing that much of the weight of our shows would be on me, because I happened to know the season at the time and happened to know that, you know, some of the shows were picked with me in mind, and I was nervous about stepping into the role of, you know, that person who represents Outcry and all of its values and all of its strengths and weaknesses. And you know, I think at this point in time, it can kind of all be summed up with a moment at the end of the play where Arthur himself realizes that he has been worthy all along, and that he really, he did it, and he succeeded in becoming the person that he was always foreseen to be. And I kind of see I've kind of had that sort of moment of realization through this, rehearsal process. And, I guess throughout these entire 8 years, you could even say, needless to say, I'm terribly sad. Really holding back some tears right now. The show has meant so much to me. Having a part written for you in your last show is pretty epic, and also getting to play King Arthur in your last show is pretty epic. And I don't think there's a higher note to go out on, for me. Getting to play King freaking Arthur throughout his entire life, getting to play, the entire life of a human being, which is like the ultimate actor experience, I think is the highest note you could go out on. And honestly, getting to play this role with Dylan, who has been at my side this entire year, not playing the same roles as me, but playing roles opposite of me, but getting to go on this final journey with him has been absolutely wonderful. And period.
All right, thanks, guys. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Miss B.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for the latest episode of the Outcry Theatre Podcast. This podcast has been produced by me, Becca Johnson-Spinos, and edited by Jason Johnson-Spinos. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your theater-loving friends.